you're just a youngster, Vanessa, but here's what I want to ask. For all of us who are coming on Saturday and for those who want to come, what are you going to share with the women at the Women's Conference on May 4th here at the Sacred Heart Chapel?
So I feel I have a bunch to offer from various perspectives. Since growing up in California, I understand how hard it is to want to talk about your faith in such a secular world, but such in a progressive secular society where it's not normal in California to have tradition. It's not normal to believe in God. So having gone to a public high school and going to public university and getting straight A's through that university, regardless of the fact that I still defended the faith in all my papers, I kind of want to touch upon that for the youth that are going to be attending the conference, because I understand that we have a lot of daughters coming and they are going through their school careers. They're going through their studies. They're in college, or they're in middle school or they're in high school, but they are probably receiving pushback from what their mothers or fathers say to what their teachers and professors are telling them. So I want to talk about defending the Catholic faith in a secular society and what that can look like, whether it just be talking about it during classes or using the fact that a lot of people use social media nowadays, and understanding that social media and the use of the internet doesn't always have to be a negative. You could actually use it to glorify God. And then in my other talk, I want to talk about what it looks like to be a Catholic woman in this world and growing up with all the pushback. I will be honest, I have engaged in online dating. I use the Bumble, the Tinder, all those things to try to find a good Catholic man. And I have been blessed to have a boyfriend of a year now where we actively are going to TLM Mass. We're always going to confession. We're always talking about God and studying the Bible. And that didn't come simple. That didn't come easy. I had to sift through a few of the guys around LA and then in Las Vegas. But I have found a way of understanding about what is my role as a young Catholic woman, and how I also have to recognize that my role as a Catholic woman is not just for me, but it's to play a role model for the other women around me that may feel lost in this world and not feel wanted or appreciated.
So what you're saying is women who have daughters, or even not have daughters, but women are going to get some insights for what you've learned from your own experience as a young woman, as a Catholic woman. And let me ask you this, are they also going to get, because I'm going to give out the cheat sheet, the apologetic cheat sheet that we published from 30 years ago of all the biblical verses for people to understand, why do we go to confession? Where's that in the Bible? John 20, all these different things that people should know as a Catholic. I want to ask you, how do you help young people really want to have a desire to have for reasons for their faith? That's the question I have, is how do you get people motivated to say, wait a minute, I've been going to church for 25 years and I didn't even realize what I was receiving. I get that a lot. How do we convince young people in general, and also people at my age, that what happens at Mass is supernatural?
Oh, of course. So one thing that I get asked often, I also taught confirmation class back in Burbank before I moved over to Las Vegas. And the parents were always asking, how can I get my kid involved? How can I get them to recognize this truth? And one thing that I've learned throughout my years of teaching the youth and engaging with the youth, we want structure, or I'm not necessarily youth anymore, but structure is what people want. They like rules. They like laws. We're inclined to want to know that. And for whatever reason, our world has thought, let us water it down for our children. Let's make it attractive to them. I think the kids today are sick and tired of that. I think the pendulum has swung back where they're on fire for knowing the truth. They don't want something, they don't want to lie. They don't want to be told that they're pretty just because they want to be felt good. They don't want just the participation trophy. They want to know the truth. They want that competition. They want that understanding of what the world around them is truly offering, and the truth being God.
Beautiful.
And so I find that the way that we can just tell people about the truth is not just making it fancy, but just give it to them. Say hey, the reason why we go to confession is because Jesus Christ said so. So if you want an exact verse, here is a verse. One thing that I was a little bit afraid about when I first started diving into Catholic apologetics, I'm about to get my master's in theological studies from Holy Apostles University. But I never thought that I would be at this place 5 years ago, because I always thought I wasn't smart enough. I always thought I'm not my grandma, like being Catholic is for the older folks. But what I realized is that you don't have to be a theologian to talk about God.
Right.
You know, in the early church, the people weren't literate. They couldn't read any scriptural text.
Right.
They just went there and listened and tried to make it make sense. But it made sense because God put it in them to be inclined towards him. And so that's the way that we can communicate with people. You don't have to be a theologian. You don't have to know every verse off the top of your head. You just have to have a love for God, a love for neighbor, and a longing for the truth and longing for that structure.
Awesome. Well, you know, Vanessa Forsberg, she's going to be at our women's conference May 4th. And I would encourage you, if you're listening, if you have a daughter, come to the women's conference. You can still sign up by going to vmpr.org or call us at 877-526-2151. You know, Vanessa, one of the questions I have in this final minutes that we have with you is on the Holy Eucharist, because it seems to me that, you know, I'm 67 years old, but when I was 13, I fell in love with the Holy Eucharist. And I want to ask your take on how do we introduce our young people to a relationship with the Holy Eucharist, and we call it the source and summit of the Christian faith as Catholics. How do we get them fired up to realize that that's actually Jesus Christ, what they receive on Sunday?
You know, it's one of those things that is just so simple to understand, that when Jesus Christ tells us that this is my body, this is my blood, he wasn't lying. That's why the people turned away from him. When you read John 6,
that's right.
66,
yes,
it's so funny. It's that verse. It's when some of his disciples turned away. That means that they even understood that this was a hard saying. This is something hard to understand. And so I think one way that we could approach this topic about the Eucharist is explaining that, yeah, this is not going to be simple for our human bodies to comprehend, but that's why it's divine. That's why it's a mystery. That is why Jesus Christ is allowing for us to know him, that he's coming down, he's humbling himself enough to come to know us as man, but also to give us his body and his blood so that we can receive him within us. So I think a way of explaining the truth of the Eucharist more and more is hitting home that you need to receive the Eucharist, hitting home that you cannot take the Eucharist in a state of sin. You have to take it in a state of grace. When we act like, oh, you could just come on Sunday and receive the Eucharist in any state that you are, we're taken away from the validity of the Eucharist in our own mind.
I get it.
And that we should understand that we need to receive God in a state of grace.
And you know, Vanessa, one thing I'll add is I have found with young people, taking them into the church before the Blessed Sacrament, you know, showing them who Jesus is. I believe the grace of the Blessed Sacrament also touches young people. I've noticed over the last 25 years a renewal of Franciscans who are doing this, where they're doing Eucharistic adoration at these youth rallies, and they're like, wow, we love it. And when I was young, Jesse was young, we were young at one time, that wasn't happening. There was a de-Eucharization going on that, you know, we just saw, oh, whatever, you know, let's don't burden anybody. Let's just be glad they're there. So the final question I have is, and we only have 2 minutes left, is when you're talking about being a young woman, can you also share a little bit of what you're going to say on Saturday about how to be really a on-fire young Catholic woman who wants to introduce people to the person of Christ?
Oh, of course. And something that I touch upon a lot when I'm talking about being a young Catholic woman is drawing on those before us.
Yeah.
When we hear about the stories of the saints, it's usually after they have already passed and their stories are being written. And we often forget that they also lived lives where they received pressure from the outside things, from their secular world during that time. I always tell people there's nothing new under the sun. So yes, we may have social media. Yes, we may have like an easier access to things that we shouldn't have easier accesses to. But the thing is we can rely on the role models before us and look to them, how even despite, you know, maybe being like almost killed or being persecuted by their worlds around them, they still remained with God. So I love to draw upon those before us and talk about how beautiful a life with God is and how we need to honor him. And that's one thing that he tells us, love the Lord your God. That's one of the 10 commandments, one of the most important commandments. And what does that look like? It looks like putting God before any of our wants, putting God before the wants of the world, putting God first. And what does that look like specifically for a Catholic woman who may be told you're being too prude or you're being too traditional, do this, do that? What does it look like for them?
Got it. Vanessa Foltzberg, she's going to be at our women's conference the 4th of May. You can still sign up by going to vmpr.org or calling 877-526-2151. Vanessa, I can't wait to meet you on Saturday. My wife will be there, Dr. Sandoval. It's going to be a great day to introduce people to the person of Christ. Every day is a great day for doing that. Thanks again for taking your time to share this with the Terry and Jesse Show.